good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm going to be talking about something kind of interesting, something we don't talk about all the time. I think something that we all are concerned about, we all question, we all maybe even worry about it. I think we actually worry about it more than anything. And it's something that we just don't seem to have our finger on the pulse with. We don't know where to find the information, and we don't know what information's real when we find it. And so, as you know on the show, I like to go to the experts, okay? If I don't know all the answers and I know somebody that has a lot of them, that's definitely someone that will be here on Live Your True Life Perspectives. So joining me live today, I call her the guru of everything. She has been researching death and life after death for over half a century. And she has an amazing researching background. She has a radio show, a TV show, and her name is Roberta Grimes. Roberta, great to have you on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Just for background, everyone, Ashley said, "What shall I call you?" So I kidded her. I said, "Why don't you just call me the guru of everything?" And you just did it, Ashley. You're so much fun. That's great.
Oh, I love it. The guru of everything pretty much sums it up for me. So I'm in there. I'm in it to win it. So I like that. I think that's a great title for you.
Thank you, dear.
You know, so today I really appreciate you coming on because I know you have a plethora of books. You have Liberating Jesus, The Fun of Loving Jesus. And today, though, we're going to talk about the fun of dying. Find out what really happens next. And so, Roberta, I have seen you on countless shows. And the last show I saw you on was on Gaia Network. And it was amazing because they were asking you all these questions. And so I just had to ask the same questions and more questions. And so that's why I had to have you on the show. But what was the reasoning behind, and I guess it was obviously a calling, but what was that calling to write The Fun of Dying?
Well, when I was 8, I had an experience of light. These are very rare, but they occur in the Bible. And I didn't, at 8, you don't know anything. I woke up in the middle of the night. I knew there was no God, and I was terrified. And in the midst of my terror, there was a bright flash of white light in the room, and a voice said, "You wouldn't know what it is to have me if you didn't know what it is to be without me. I will never leave you again." So when you're 8, of course, nothing surprises you because everything that happens is surprising. And I just thought at the time, oh, isn't it handy if you forget there's a God, they'll remind you. I went back to sleep. But I never told anyone what had happened to me. I never asked a question. I never got an answer. I even majored in the early Christian history in college, thinking that when you get there, they'll tell you what happens if you forget there's a God. But I still didn't get an answer. So I had a second experience of light when I was 20, in which I just heard that voice saying, "I will never leave you." And that made me realize there's something behind the curtain. I want to know what it is. And since no one seemed to be forthcoming, if you don't ask a question, of course. Of course, if I'd asked the question, I would have gotten stupid answers anyway. So it's good that I did the research. And I've been doing it. I literally continue to do it after 50 years of trying to understand. And we understand actually very well what happens at and after death. We understand a lot about reality that most people have no clue about because, of course, neither science nor any religion will look at the present evidence, which is overwhelming and consistent.
That's interesting because I find it's one of the things that for many people, and I think you would agree with this, it scares. It scares the general person. I mean, what's going to happen and what is it like? And, and is it going to be like this or am I going to lose my identity? And it gets overwhelming. And so, when you're talking to folks, what are the first things that you can tell us that, are going to happen or what's kind of the beginning that we can't expect after this life? Because I think everybody doesn't know. Is it all going to go black? Are we going to go to different levels of heaven? Are we going to come back? And so you have all these ideas. And then some people they're too scared to even think about the ideas.
The most important thing for everyone listening to understand is that you are a perfect eternal being, having a very brief experience here, but you never began, you never will end, and you are infinitely loved. When you understand that, everything else, basically the fear falls away when you really get that. Nothing that the religions tell you is true. They're all, old belief systems, and they're about what people thought God was. Well, God is much greater than any religion could ever begin to tell you. God is all that exists. and your mind is a part of that divine entity.
Powerful stuff and very real. I find that to be extremely true. And I agree with you. It's I think the fear of anything, when we don't have enough knowledge in our life on anything, we fear it because we just don't have those answers and we're in the dark. When you began doing this research, what were some of the things that you really, because I know that you probably had some ideas already, but did you have some aha moments where you were already right about stuff and then you were able to confirm being right?
Actually, I didn't have any preconceived notions. I wanted to know what was going on. My biggest aha moment was when I had read hundreds of communications received mainly through deep trance mediums between about the middle of the 19th and through the first part of the 20th centuries. I read all these communications received in Great Britain, in southern and eastern United States, and every last one of those people had been to the same place. They all had different experiences, but it was, as I say in The Fun of Dying, it was like reading hundreds of accounts of people who had all been to Fiji over a century or so. They all had different experiences, but it was the same process, the same physics, the same pastimes, the same everything was going on. And that was my biggest aha moment I've ever had I've had two. That was the first of those two. Because it made me realize this has to be real. Because otherwise it's impossible for there to be only these consistent accounts being received over all this time through mediums. So once you realize it's real, you say, yay, I've discovered something wonderful. And then you start trying to figure out what it is you've discovered. And that's what I did for the rest of my life.
I think it's interesting, too, in the book you were talking about, deathbed visions. Because, nowadays I find that most people... I guess most of us pass away in a hospital, right? Under, different types of medication, hooked up to different types of, machinery. I find that hospitals also can be very scary to people as well. Do you think that that's changed the experience of dying in any way?
Yes, of course it has, yes. And the natural death process, you are very lightly or not medicated at all. The natural death process involves, within the 24 hours or so before you die, having people you thought were dead show up, and they look just great. Aunt Mildred, Grandma, Mom, your pets from childhood, they all show up and they look wonderful. And they're there for a specific purpose, which we now begin to understand. But when people are heavily sedated, what usually happens is that they simply go to sleep here and they wake up there. And when they wake up, it's in a solid reality, which is very much like this. In fact, some people wake up in their own house there, and the only way that people can convince them that they're actually dead is they take them to the door and they open the door and they say, now, do you see this city around you, or is it just beautiful countryside? Oh, no, it looks very different. All right, well, you're dead. This is what the afterlife looks like. It's so real. It's so solid. Just like here, only beautiful.
I find that interesting. I've been meditating for a long period of time, and I've been really working at that meditation. And the reason why I've been doing it so much is because the last thing I want to do, and I know this sounds crazy to some people, but I don't want to go into death unconscious.
Yes, I don't either. It's more fun if you do it, when you're awake, of course.
And let me ask you, I don't know if this is because I don't know if this is true or not, but when you're going through the process consciously, aren't you able to see the situation take place? You're able to understand what's going on. And are you able to even choose even more than you have a chance to choose if you go in unconscious? Or does that have any play with it whatsoever?
It's sort of like when you're born. I mean, it's all happening and you want to experience it, but you have no idea what's going on. And many people who have been through a death and talk to us from afterwards will talk about how wonderful it was, but they weren't leading that dance. It was being led by their guides and by their loved ones. The process, though, is very straightforward. It involves having your energy bodies, which are internal to your physical body, separate and then leave, usually like it looks like a mist if you're sitting in a deathbed, leave through the chest or through the top of the head. And then it rises, and then it seems to disappear because it's rising in vibration very rapidly, and it reforms into a person. And that's you, and you're still attached by the silver cord, but very quickly that will fray. And you then follow your loved ones for a very brief period until you go through a little fog, and then the fog clears, and you are in a beautiful, solid reality that is exactly in the same place where we are. Think of it more like changing TV channels. Right now you're tuned to that body on this level of reality. When you die, all that happens is that you tune to a slightly different, higher channel, and you pick up a whole new channel right there. New body, new solid reality. It's that simple.
Roberta, that's amazing. When we come back, I have some more questions. Well, I have a lot of questions for you, but I can't wait because this is amazing. When we return, we'll be talking more about death after life and about what that means and kind of walking through the process. Roberta's going to help us to understand this and the truth that she's been doing research with for over half a century, which is amazing. So don't change the channel. We'll be back talking about this. And in the meantime, if you want more information, you want to see any past shows, go to ashleyburgess.com, Ashley, BERGES.com, and live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. I'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
Turn it up and jump in the deep end on Perspectives. Now, here's Ashley.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I have the amazing Roberta Grimes. Roberta has been doing, she's been doing research for over half a century on death and death after life and the afterlife situation. Roberta, so great to have you on the show today.
Oh, it's so good to be with you. We're having so much fun with this.
I love it. And so, right before the break, you had talked about how it's just like turning the channel. So it's like, the reality that we have here is this reality, and then when you leave this life and you go into the afterlife, it's very similar, but it's like crystal clear and it's really clean and it's really beautiful. I always wondered if our afterlife is just kind of above this one. I guess that was the question I always kind of wondered.
Well, the most important thing for people to understand about how reality is constructed is that there is no such thing as solid matter. There is only a kind of energy which we experience in a dim way as consciousness. And that consciousness exists in a range of vibrations with fear, anger, hatred, all the ishy emotions at the lowest vibration and perfect love at the highest. And so what happens is that we right now are naturally weighed down by the fact that we are in this, the only part of reality, less than 5% of it is material, and that's where we happen to be stuck taking our lessons here. But when we leave our bodies, our vibration naturally rises and rises quite a bit. And as we do that, we're suited to level 3 or higher of what we think of as the afterlife. And we enter that, but it's in the same place. It can be, because when you think about your TV channels, they're all in the same room. They're all in the same place, but it's energy, and that's why you can pick up different channels. Exactly the same thing is true. But your mind is the only part that is eternal, and that eternal mind is part of the consciousness that is what God is.
I was going to ask you, I'm speaking from my position in life, is that I've done a lot of work. I've given back. I've been very dedicated, and I think there's a lot of my listeners that probably feel the same. Very spiritually dedicated to helping their fellow men out there to help other people, and really thinking about themselves. Not always last, but most of the time. Is there different layers or different levels? In the afterlife, depending on the kind of work you've done in this lifetime?
It's not about the work you've done. It's about how much you love. Love is all that matters. We come here to push against negativity specifically so we can choose love in every case. Whatever the question, love is always the answer. There is nothing else we are here to learn except how to love ever more perfectly. And so if you're doing, Jesus says this in the Bible. He says, no matter what you do, if you're doing all this big shot stuff and you don't have love, you're a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. You don't mean anything. But if whatever you do, if you're doing it out of perfect love, then yes, you do raise your vibration quite a bit, and you can achieve ever more beautiful levels of the afterlife. It's extraordinary how beautiful it becomes as you go higher.
That's amazing. Love is quintessential, and it is interesting to me about forgiveness and gratitude, and
yes,
eventually seeing, one of the things that I practice, as a therapist and as a coach as well, when I work with my clients that, they'll ask me about purpose. And for a long time years ago, I used to thought purpose was, something you did outside of yourself to create goodness within society. But then I've realized that purpose, the ultimate purpose, is to completely have unconditional love for yourself, but then be able to provide that unconditional love for everybody that you come into contact with. And I think that's really part of our purpose, and I think that's a big thing. And when people ask me about acceptance and unconditional love, and they're looking for that within a parent or a spouse, and I try to explain to them, if someone doesn't have that for themselves, or they don't understand how to create that in their own life, they can't provide that for you. But one of the biggest things is that our life, our relationship with ourselves, I think getting to know ourselves and loving ourselves is the most important relationship we can have.
Yes, but the key really is forgiveness. This is something that Jesus said, and again, he was right about everything. It's just that the religion has nothing to do with him. But he told us you have to learn to forgive over and over completely, and he was right. And there are ways to learn to do that. People say to me, well, if someone hurt my child, I could never forgive that. Or, my ex-husband was such a rat, I could never forgive him. There is no level of difficulty in forgiveness. Once you learn how to forgive properly, it doesn't matter. You can forgive it all. And the key reason why you can is that none of it's real anyway. Nobody ever is harmed. The people who are now working most desperately to rescue from the outer darkness, which is what Jesus talked about too, the guards from the Holocaust, from those concentration camps, those guards who did such horrible things, they have put themselves into torment. And who is rescuing them, working day and night to rescue them? They're victims. Their victims are just fine. It was all a play. It wasn't real. And when you get that, and when you get how important it is to really understand that and to forgive no matter what, it becomes so much easier to forgive. My book on that subject, incidentally, is The Fun of Growing Forever, and I give exercises there to make it easier.
That's very powerful. I have heard people say how they can't forgive something or they can't forgive someone. It's interesting because that only really hurts the person that can't forgive.
Yes, you're so right, Ashley, exactly right.
And it's interesting why we would hold that anger and resentment. And you're right. And when we're talking about vibrational levels, when we hold on to anger and resentment and shame and guilt and all that stuff, it just brings our vibrational level just to it's low.
Way down. Yes, exactly right. And you're right. The only person that you hurt is yourself if you can't love and forgive. Forgiveness is really the gift that you give to yourself. It's the greatest gift you can give to yourself, is freeing yourself from every bit of resentment and negativity and letting yourself rise, because that's what naturally happens. Our natural vibratory rate is far higher than where we are right now. And get rid of the ballast and you go and you can fly.
I love that. And I think a lot of folks out there right now, when we're talking about frequency and we're talking about this vibrational frequency, it's, we've all been in places where you've been around groups of people that it's just fabulous. You can feel the energy. It feels very uplifting. It feels very good. It feels very safe. It seems like it's eye-opening. And then you've been around other different situations and maybe even by yourself in a depth of a negative frequency. That, and I think is based on fear and hate, and I think anything that comes off of that fear, which is hate, anger, that type of thing, the opposite of love.
Yes, yeah, no, you're right. You're able to sense it, but it is so easy to do this. Because you don't have to think about it. Whatever the question, love is always the answer. And the more perfectly you can love, the higher you will vibrate. We do reincarnate repeatedly, and we come back to learn that same basic lesson. So if you're determined, you don't want to have to come back, it's pretty easy. You just learn it right this time. And you can. I don't care how old you are. You can learn it, and you can make this your last Earth lifetime.
So let me ask you, if you're coming from a position of someone that thinks that they're in that process, practices unconditional love for people, has practiced complete acceptance and forgiveness. What are the options, when we speak after this life? What do those options look like to somebody in that situation?
Which situation? You mean someone who has raised their vibration, or someone who has
somebody that has?
Well, it turns out we think for convenience about 7 levels of the afterlife, but in fact there are probably infinite levels because, think of how many channels you have on your TV set. The lowest is what Jesus called the utter darkness, which is cold and dark. There is no hell. There's no devil. And then the highest is what we call the source, level 7. Once you get to the upper half of level 5, you don't have to come back, because you are able to learn enough there. You're vibrating high enough that you can carry on into the 6th level, where we are learning how to join the Godhead, which is at level 7. So the higher you are vibrating, the more options there are. It's interesting, but people think, oh, I don't even, the Summerland's beautiful. I'll just go to level 3 and be happy. People who are actually there very quickly crave, like you've never craved anything in your life, they crave spiritual growth, because there's so much more fun the higher you go, and you want that fun. And people want it badly enough to come back to this awful place and set themselves some horrible, horrible lessons. Death of a child, horrible illness, spouse who's terrible childhood. Those are all part of the plan you made for yourself, because by choosing love in all instances, you're able to grow rapidly. And the worse the lessons, the better the growth. So yeah, let's all plan these horrible lives. But unfortunately, when we get here, we forget what the life was for. We forget why we planned these terrible lives. We think, oh, God hates me because I had this bad thing happen. And then we have to come back and do the whole stupid thing over again. So I'm all about helping people learn how to do it right, and then we never have to come back, and we can just all have this gigantic party there.
I love that. Oh, my gosh. I'm in total agreement on that one. When we return, Roberta and I are going to be talking more about the death experience and what that means, and we're gonna start back from where we just came from, because this is some good stuff. We'd rather learn it now than come back. So stay tuned, because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 2 shakes.
This is Jake Busey, and you're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about life after death, and joining me is Roberta Grimes. Roberta is the guru of everything. I'm going to say that one more time, and And right before the break, Roberta was talking to us about, getting it right this time. And, Roberta, I've shared with my listeners before, I have a condition that I got when I was born, and it was a rare condition. Out of 180 people had it, misdiagnosed, was on the operating table multiple times, was almost killed in surgery 3 different times. And
Wow.
That was when I was, and that started at the age of birth, going through that process, and until I was 20-something years old, I finally took my life into my own hands. I told the last doctor I'm not going to have another experimental surgery done, and I took another year plus and ended up getting rid of the handicap sticker eventually, and I took my life back into my own hands. But growing up as a child and in elementary school, middle school, and going through this process and not knowing if you're going to live and die and stuff really changed my trajectory, because at first I had that low self-esteem and that low self-worth, and how could God do this to someone that was worthy? That was in my head, like, how could that happen to somebody that's good enough? And I finally got it right, because I realized I kind of got what a lot of people get in the end, I got in the beginning. And I was like, oh. And when I started realizing the lesson that I think that I had chosen for myself before I showed up this time, and I started understanding it, it changed the whole trajectory. And one of the things that I learned when I was going through the process is I didn't know if I was going to see somebody the next day. So I showed love, and I really got to know people at a deep level, because I really didn't know the expectancy there. And it changed my life forever. I see things very differently. And that's kind of when I finally grasped it, Roberta. It changed my life, because before, when I was resonating at that lower frequency, I didn't understand. I was scared. I was fearful. I felt bad about myself. And then when I started resonating at the higher frequency, I realized, well, it was kind of a gift. It was actually a gift.
It was a gift.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wonderful gift. Many people have trouble believing that some gifts are not fun to receive, but they're still the most wonderful gifts you could get all the same. And that's true of so much that happens to us in this lifetime. But no, that child has not died. We'll be waiting for you and giving you the biggest hugs ever. That miscarried baby has not died, and we'll be waiting for you now as a young adult, and we'll call you mom. I mean, there's no, all the things we think are tragedies are not tragedies at all. They're opportunities for us to choose love and forgiveness in each instance.
So let me ask you, on the different levels, you were talking about the 7 levels. There's possibly multiple hundreds of levels.
They're all divided up pretty fine, but this is for our convenience. Our little pea brains can't understand much more than this.
So there's 7. So what are the 7 different types of levels if we were going to talk about it and kind of look at it? So the first level you said was, what was that again?
The outer darkness. It's very gray, very cold, very smelly and disgusting, and it's full of demons who are actually people who see themselves as demons. Jesus talks about it in the Gospels, the outer darkness where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. He got it perfectly right. Above that is level 2, which is sort of like a getting better level. Some people don't fall quite that low to end up in the outer darkness, but still where they are, it's kind of dim. My father was there for a period of time. I'm pretty confident. Oh, wow. Level 3 is where most people enter the afterlife. It's the first of the 3 Summerland levels, and it's beautiful. It's like the most beautiful earth visions you can possibly imagine. And the North American Summerland actually has the Rocky Mountains around it. So it's like beautiful. Imagine the most wonderful thing you could imagine that you ever could see, and that's level 3. Level 4 looks even better than that, and level 5 is extraordinary. Above level 5, that's the top Summerland level, we get to what's historically we thought was not even physical. Now we know it is, and it's even more beautiful still. Level 6 has historically been called the causal level or the mental level. It's where all the rest is created, and probably where material reality is created too. And that's right below the source level, which is level 7. We don't still know much about what's in level 7, but level 7 is the Godhead.
Well, and so let me ask you, you were saying earlier, you think your dad was in level 2. Is that just kind of the way that he lived his life or his choices, or do you think he eventually moved out of that? I'm assuming came back into this lifetime to try again, but what were your thoughts on that?
Well, here's the thing. We all think God judges us. Jesus tells us right in the Bible that God does not judge us. There is no judge other than ourselves. And we know what we planned, and we know how far we fell short of our plan. So we judge ourselves often pretty harshly. And if you can't forgive yourself and everybody else, easy to forgive other people, no matter what they did, but ourselves it's harder. That's how people end up in the outer darkness or on level 2. Nothing anyone else did. It's what we did and our inability to forgive it. Now, my father was an alcoholic, and for 20 years after he died, he would show up whenever, because I was testing mediums a lot. He would show up often. They'd describe him well. He would never speak. It wasn't for 20 years, and finally, after 20 years, he spoke to my daughter through a medium and said, "Will you please ask your mother and her sister to forgive me for messing up their childhood?" Now, I had already seen him in a communication dream, and where he was, it was oddly dark. And I wondered at the time that he was at level 2, but then when he finally started saying how bad he felt, I realized, of course, he was at level 2. He had never been able quite to resolve how bad he felt about his lifetime. So this is the reason why, if you're thinking, I'll never forgive people, I don't care what she says, this is the reason why. The hardest forgiveness task you'll ever have, ever, is when you go before the council and your guides and your loved ones, and you are seeing and basically reliving the effect you've had on everybody's life around you, not just on yourself. You're going to have to forgive yourself then. Hardest forgiveness task you'll ever have. And if you haven't practiced forgiveness of everybody around you, which is the easy stuff. Oh, killed by children, easy, compared to forgiving yourself for falling short of your own wishes about this lifetime. So that's the reason to work hard at forgiveness. And it's really not that hard. It really isn't once you understand how important it is.
What are some of the ways that people can begin to wrap their minds around forgiving? Because I do think that a lot of people, even if they can forgive others, they have a real challenge of forgiving things that they've done in their past.
There are two kinds of forgiveness. One is each time somebody does a bad thing, you have to figure out how to forgive them. That's impossible. I can't do it. Nobody can. I call it bespoke forgiveness in each case. A better way to do it is to teach your mind never to be bothered by anything, no matter what. And you can do that pretty easily because you've taught yourself to get mad at people in traffic or to be irritated by your mother-in-law. And all the things that you think you have trouble forgiving, you taught yourself to be upset about those things. So I call it making forgiveness balls. All you do is you gather up whatever you think is going to bother you, and you make a big, tight sort of ball with it, and then you push it away saying, I love you, I bless you, I forgive, and I release. And by doing that, you divert your mind from being upset about the fact that your husband's socks are all over the floor. And if it's in the beginning, it can mean you have to do it maybe a couple of times. But you'll discover, I found it took probably 5 to 6 weeks, and suddenly I realized nothing was bothering me at all. I haven't made a forgiveness ball in a decade. I haven't needed to. And I've never been unable to forgive anything. So it's so easy to get control of your own mind. Just as you so beautifully got control of your own mind and your own life, you can do this with forgiveness very easily, and then you'll never be bothered by anything again.
That's amazing. That's perfect. And because I think a lot of people, you're right, we get stuck in that thought process of what we should feel like, or
yes,
the anger we should be feeling. And, in the news and other things, reinforce that, they should be angry, they should, this is injustice, and then you get people up in arms and everybody's angry. And then that's when it starts spilling out into everything people are doing. And you can't compartmentalize anger.
No, and frankly, if you're angry, then you have taught yourself to be angry, and it doesn't help anything. You can't even fix the things that are bothering you until you're able to rise above that. So to me, this teaching yourself how to forgive is the single most basic. I call it forgiving. I call it prevenient forgiveness. It's forgiveness that happens before anything bothers you. Once you've forgiven once and for all everything that ever will bother you again, nothing ever bothers you again. Believe me, this is true. I've been my own guinea pig, and it amazes me how well it works. And this is the kind of forgiveness Jesus talked about. If you're a Christian, you should be following Jesus. If you're not a Christian, all the more. You don't have to worry about any of the dogmas because they have nothing to do with him. His teachings are what matters.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I love it. I love it. We'll be talking more when we return. We'll be talking more with Roberta Grimes about, the experience of death after life. It's something that many of us, we wonder about. We sit up thinking about, and I think it's something that we need to discern and understand. And I think like anything else, knowledge is power, and understanding where you're going to go and be able to get ready for that, prepare for that, just like you prepare for anything else in life is super powerful. If you haven't already, check out the YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and put in Ashley Burgess, AShleyBurgess. New video content every week, directed toward the issues that you might be dealing with in life, self-help, and the list goes on. Stay tuned because Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 2 shakes.
You could be my luck.
Get in here. You're listening to Perspectives with Ashley Burgess.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about life after death and what that means, and I have Roberta Grimes on the show. She's been researching this for over half a century, and so I figured she's the expert to go to. Roberta, so I know this is the big enchilada question. How do you make this lifetime the last one on this in this place on this planet? Maybe.
Well, the main thing to do is to conquer all negativity, and the first and probably most important way to do that, of course, is first to teach yourself to always forgive. When things are no longer bothering you, you'll find that you actually have to withdraw from negative people. You can't even be around them. It's like they singe you in an odd way. But then the next thing to do is cleanse your mind and your life of all negativity. I mean, we swim in negativity in this culture, but you don't have to. 20 years ago, I stopped watching television. I stopped going to movies. I stopped listening to the radio, talk radio or whatever. I stopped allowing any negativity into my life. You can actually, your friends will tell you what horrible thing may have happened, and then you have it in a little sort of manageable way. But what I found pretty quickly when I stopped letting the negativity in was that I started to feel so much better naturally. No video games. We didn't have social media back then, but Lord, get that out of your life. All it is a sewer. Don't swim in a sewer. I then started living with the top of my head where it was always open, and I basically invited my guides in to help me clean up the mess that of negativity that my mind had become. And it wasn't long. I think about it as cleaning up the living room because that's where you live. And if you're going to live there forever, and you will, you don't want anything negative in it. And that's really the first step. Once you have done that, and if you're interested in knowing how to read more, where you could read more about this, we've been talking about this at robertagrimes.com on my blog. I think it's the most recent blog post posted was about cleaning up your living room. And this coming weekend, I'm going to be talking about, how then, once all of that has begun, how do you really make this your last Earth lifetime? It's not difficult because all you have to do is get to the upper part of level 5, and once you're there, you're vibrating high enough you'll never have to come back. But you can't allow anything that's presently in your life to bother you, because if it's bothering you, you are going to come back to deal with it in a different lifetime. That's just how it is.
So first off, you got to be cleaning up your living room. You got to take care of that. You got to make sure, and like limiting the negative. It's interesting how somebody can share a really negative story, and how that can really get you down. And you're right. There's a lot of times you'll look on Facebook. The other night I had gotten home from work. It was really late from the office, and I looked at Facebook for one moment to post something, and there we go. I see this horrible story.
Yes.
And it took so long to try to get it out of my mind. And, it's not ever, it's not out, but to try to reason with it and to try to let it go. And even my husband was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm not going to share this with you because I don't want to give this to you." I said, "So I really can't share it." I said, "Unfortunately, right now, I'm just trying to figure out how to let this go." At first I said digest it, but then I said vomit. I got to figure out how to let this go and move on, and it took me a good 40-something minutes to get right with that.
That's the problem. And think about how awful the news stations are. I don't care whether it's Fox, CNN, MSNBC, all of the news stations are sewers of negativity. And if you allow yourself, my husband still watches them, but he somehow is able to handle it much better than I am. When I stopped 20 years ago, stopped watching. I understand we recently had a presidential election. That's my level of understanding of what's going on in the world. And you know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me at all. And when you get all the negativity out of your life, your vibration rises so naturally. You're actually happy all the time. Nothing is going to get in your way. Unless I had done that, I would never have been able to write The Fun of Dying or any of the books that have come after. I spend my life now helping other people to grow spiritually, and I could never have done that if I hadn't cleaned up my mind and then gotten all that garbage out of my life.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be able to help people. If you had all that going on, because that would be interfering with your ability to communicate as well as being mindful in the moment.
Yes. The only way to rescue the world is first to get yourself out of the negativity. The subtitle of The Fun of Growing Forever is you can't transform the world unless you first transform yourself. And that's true. And many people wonder how we can ever save the world. It's not even going to be that hard. Because when even as few as 10% of us, and it's a lot of people, but not that many, worldwide are vibrating high enough, because we're all part of the same consciousness, our consciousness will raise the vibration of everybody else on Earth. Suddenly, ISIS will be patting puppies. Suddenly, the haters will find it, something's really nice about these people they used to hate. It's just surprising how rapidly we can do this if we decide together we have had enough and we are going to transform the world. That's all it will take.
It's powerful. That's powerful. And Roberta, lasting thoughts for our listeners. And before, and I don't want you to forget to also explain where they can find you. But lasting thought, if somebody's on the road to this and they're really focusing on it, what's the most motivational push to really get there?
As you raise your vibration, you become so much happier. Most of us are not happy, and we feel our lives are dead-ended. Well, you can open up a glorious horizon for your life that you cannot even imagine now if you begin to raise your vibration. When you have control of that, and when you are really, really growing spiritually, you're going to be happy like you cannot even imagine you ever could have been happy. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your life is like. You can make it wonderful.
Powerful stuff. And Roberta, where can folks listen to you? Because you have your own show. Where can they find you?
Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes is really kind of all over the place at this point. The easiest way, though, to find most of my 5-6 years of podcasts is on webtalkradio.net. Just look for Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes there. And we call it Seek Reality because we all should be doing that. Neither religions nor science will look at more than a narrow slice of what's true. But when we look at everything that is true and we're putting it all together, it does make a complete, gigantic picture, and it makes sense. So what we do on Seek Reality is we put reality together, and we use it to make our own lives more wonderful.
Awesome, Roberta. Well, I want to have you come back on. If you'll come back on, Live Your True Life Perspectives.
I would love it. That would be thrilling. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. Well, I know that this has been an amazing show. Thank you so much for being on and such powerful information.
Thank you. You're wonderful. I appreciate it so much.
Great show today. Great show with Roberta Grimes. Looking forward to having her back on the show. And in the meantime, just finding that true self, finding that true life, and just getting right with yourself is so powerful. And our relationship with ourselves is the most important. Once we get that right, we can help other people. Stay tuned. Live Your True Life Perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back this time in 3 shakes.